Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. All right, and today's guest is Jonathan Freeman. Hi, Jonathan.
Good morning, Adi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Oh, blessed to be here and excited to share my thoughts around your topic of choice today.
Excellent. And we're going to talk, of course, about processes. But first of all, I want to tell our listeners a little bit about you. So You are the COO of a fast-growing wealth management company in San Diego.
That's right.
And you held different positions as the COO throughout your career, all the way from startups to Fortune 50 companies. So you definitely seen it all, right? I mean, it's a pretty big array there from the startup to the Fortune 50. And you specialize as a COO in operations, but growing companies. And that's your passion, to grow companies and help them succeed in terms of people, processes, and culture.
You got it. That's where I love to be. Yep.
Excellent. So today we're going to talk about how to manage growth, and especially accelerated growth and huge growth, or growth that you're experiencing very fast. How do you manage it, right? So we talk about some of the challenges and some of the tools and advice that you can give to other entrepreneurs that are listening to us right now and want to know what systems should I put in place? What's the most important thing? How do I manage that amazing growth that I'm experiencing? So give me a little bit of a background first in terms of like the growth and the accelerated growth that you are experiencing right now.
Yeah, our firm is based in San Diego, and we've been growing just about 75 to 100% per year in most key metrics, whether that's people or our overall client base. And so when you're experiencing growth like that, it's so critical to have structure. And companies sometimes stumble upon success. Sometimes they're very focused about it, or other times they've just got a phenomenal product or service that creates growth without a lot of effort. But most companies actually have to put some effort into it. But unless the entrepreneur or business owner has gone through it before, in many cases, they're learning as they go. And growth becomes such a challenge because they haven't thought through, what do I need at that next stage of growth, whether that's more people, structure, systems. And so in many cases, they're playing catch up along the way. And the most thoughtful leaders I've seen really think about, okay, where are my breakpoints going to be, and how can I get ahead of that and continue to grow and scale so that I can bring in the right talent, have the right systems or procedures, and avoid, stumbling or hiccups along the way. So that's really where I would encourage, business owners that are experiencing high growth to find resources like you, like others who help companies scale, and learn from their history, learn from their knowledge and prior experience, and don't have to, repeat it through mistakes, repeat it through good consulting and advice and bringing people to the table. I recently joined a board of advisors that was for a high growth company. And in their situation, they're doing the smart thing. They're bringing in outside advisors to leverage that experience, help them, identify areas where they can hopefully solve pain points ahead of where they would have otherwise. And that's just going to lead to better success and more rapid growth.
Yeah, I agree. Board of advisors are a great advice to give to people, because then you surround yourself with people that already experienced that, and they can lead you forward. But let's talk about those challenges. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the solutions. So from your career, from your present position, what are the main challenges that you either experienced or saw that entrepreneurs face when they actually experience major growth?
Yeah. Well, one is certainly people. So most companies revolve around people. We here at Centura consider them our number one asset. But in many cases, one of my strong philosophies has really been culture over strategy. Yeah, you can have a great business strategy, but if you don't have a vibrant and energetic culture, you can't recruit and retain the best talent to help you achieve that strategy. So I've had a long philosophy of vibrant cultures are really what ultimately make business a success. And so developing and putting thought into not only how to define your culture, then communicate it to potential recruits, to your clients, your customers, whoever that is, because ultimately that's the distinguishing feature that make people want to do business with you or enjoy doing business with you, is trying to source and build that strong culture. So most companies that are going through high growth are out there trying to find the right cultural fit along with the people that know how to do the jobs that they need within the organization. So I think one of the biggest challenges that I see is a good, I'll call it talent management or talent acquisition process so that they can avoid hiring the wrong people. Don't make bad hiring mistakes, because ultimately that takes a lot of time and cost to ultimately retrain or bring someone new in once you've found someone that hasn't worked out. So we've incorporated a variety of hiring tools. Predictive Index is one of them. But having the team in the interview side of whoever's doing the interviewing process, whether that's managers or a dedicated HR function, making sure they're trained to really look for key success factors, history, accomplishments, that will lead or at least give a higher probability that once they're in the culture that they'll fit in and ultimately be really successful in the role that they're being hired for.
I agree. Absolutely. I mean, hiring is key. And I think I probably had 3 or 4 podcasts already on just the hiring process itself, interviewing different experts and different tools that are being used for that. So because people they just panic, for lack of a better word. It's you have all these orders from customers, so you have new clients that get referred to you, and you have this business coming in and coming in and coming in, and you realize that you hit your own barrier, or the people that also work for you that you have right now, they can't service anymore, so you have to hire. And if you don't have a system in place, you might go hire whomever applies, but then it creates the problem. So that's definitely a challenge. So it's preparing ahead of time, but how ahead of time do you prepare? It's kind of like the chicken and the egg, right? I mean, you can go into creating processes for hiring that are really tight and very good, but you maybe not need to hire right away, right? But then when you need to hire, it might be too late. So I think from my experience, seeing that's part of being a strategic leader, is to first of all, creating the culture. I agree with you 100%. You have to create it from the get-go. You don't have to wait until you grow. You have to determine what your culture is. But then as a strategic leader, you have to figure out also when is the time to start putting a little bit more of the organization into the company. So then you can actually bring on more people orderly as opposed to in a chaos.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that goes to another point that I think is core to my philosophy, which is, in order to scale in a high growth company, everyone in the organization needs to have a little bit of time and energy and focus around how do they make their job or their department better, more efficient, more seamless, or improve quality. And so, what we've done within our organization is really push it down to each individual to document those routine processes that they do on a day in and day out basis, so that when they bring in the next person, there's an existing, whether it's call it employee desk manual or process guide or whatever it might be, that's in place so that they're not having to spend their productive time training somebody else, that there's almost a step-by-step guide that greets them on day one. And so we put that on every individual to, one, ensure that their areas of responsibility are documented. And then 2, that it's kept up to date, because in any high growth company, things are changing constantly. And many times when companies put effort towards documenting something, as soon as it's set in print, it's changed and something's evolved, something's gone different. And so having a really dynamic system to be able to adapt and continue to move with that change is pretty critical towards achieving both of those objectives, both documentation and then flexibility to manage growth, because the organization that's serving 10 clients today and they have to grow to 100, each of the steps within that organization will have to vary greatly, because there's going to be more people, more intermediary processes, and so it has to evolve as the company evolves.
Absolutely. So documentation is so important. And you and I had discussions over it, and we talked about, and you're using a platform, like a process documentation platform, which is extremely important because it makes it basically a unified. I mean, everything looks the same, right? It's accessible. It's easy to use. It's easy to revise. It's easy to implement, etc. So I definitely agree with that 100%. And that should be part of the onboarding process, is to train the new employees as well as retrain and keep current the existing employees. That's key in a fast growing company, in any company, but definitely in a fast growing company. Because, go ahead.
No, I think a lot of this, it's interesting to see how as technology has really evolved even over my career. When I started, one of the companies that really provide the foundation of who I am and how I operate today is Intel Corporation, which, as you may know, is a very process-driven company. Mm-hmm. And when I started, we were building millions upon millions of computer chips all around the world. And they had a system called Copy Exact. And Copy Exact is basically the way they took a process, made sure it was dialed and down to the very specifics of every element of that. And then the manufacturing team's job was to replicate that in multiple factories all around the world. So that kind of mentality or culture and process really was something I grew into or grew up in, I'll call it, in my career. And that's carried with me. And so when it used to be that we'd spend, countless hours in a Word document, kind of outlining every step in the process and putting it in fine print, there's now tools that you can leverage that are, of course, web-based, but ultimately can evolve and be very dynamic and integrate content from video to all sorts of other elements that make it much more scalable, much more flexible than what I, started with a few decades ago. So sure. It's been impressive. And I think those I'll call them technology companies that are helping provide services like that are really going to be sought after and a great resource for companies that are in high growth mode, because they need flexible tools that, again, can be scalable across geography, across location, or even across multiple people.
For sure. And you use Whale, right?
Yes, we were introduced to Whale by you. Thank you for that introduction.
You're welcome.
And it was something that was, in my mind, intuitive, easy to use, easy to deploy. And some of the technology elements that they built in terms of ability to do smart lookups and or activity-based recommendations really is pretty innovative. And so we're still getting started. We're trying to migrate all of our prior documentation and tools into Whale. But so far, so good. And we're continuing to build that in and now incorporate that into our training and what we call a ramp plan. So as someone comes into the organization, what does it look like on, week 1, week 3, and, day 180? Each of those we're trying to build out. So there's some consistency in that training plan.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love using Whale, and I have many clients on it. So I would include a link in the podcast so people can check it out. But you can also go to Whale. I think it's usewhale.io, and then you can check it out. I love using a platform, as I said, because it just makes it so much easier. So now let's talk about, we talked about some of the challenges. I think one of the challenges as well that goes along with it is getting the processes implemented, right? Because especially if you're growing fast, because it's go, 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 right? It's the servicing the next client or hiring the next person, or you're understaffed. So you need to basically produce, but you don't have time to document or to implement. And you feel like from my experience, what I hear from my clients before we start on this process is, well, my staff is not going to buy in because they're so busy and they don't have time to follow processes, which I know it's kind of like, in some ways it's illogic, but I can also see why they're saying it, because it's easier to just go, go, go than to stop for a second and organize. So it's a great balance between those two, but how do you manage with that? How do you get the processes actually implemented by everyone?
Well, it's a great question. And so, part of it is building it in the culture, right? If it's not in the culture, you're always uphill, in an uphill battle. If it doesn't start from the top and you're trying to push it from some, lower level position within the organization, it will likely run into a wall of either, yes, I'm too busy, it's not important, I don't know why I'm doing this, and all these excuses that ultimately will just lead to that ongoing challenge of, poor execution, I'll call it. And so it really needs to be embraced at the, at the most senior management levels in the organization. And then from there, it really is striving to show and communicate the importance of that. And so some of the things that we've done to help kind of, I'll call it, ease the burden is, we're always trying to bring in young talent, and we have a kind of a constant rotation of interns that we'll bring in. And part of the intern's job is to help in documentation. So while they might not be the primary owner of the process, they're working with other owners to help kind of provide and, do a screen recording or whatever it might be to help in that process. And so that's one area to do it. We also try and make it part of our annual reviews, in an annual ongoing basis to make sure everyone is keeping their, I'll call it, desk manual up to date. And so it's just while everyone's busy, there just needs to be a constant reinforcement of, hey, you need to spend 5 or 10% of your time making sure that your area of the organization is documented, accurate, and can be, the next person in the door who hopefully, if you're on a career path and you want to move up in the organization, you want someone to come in behind you, learn your job so that you can move up and continue to, thrive in the organization. And so those tools really help you accomplish that, along with helping, create happy customers or, ensuring that the company is successful.
Absolutely. And I think the key is what you said in terms of making it part of the culture and the leadership team embracing the idea that processes are important. And I definitely got that from you in terms of like, this is important. It's as important as other things. It's not, it doesn't go down to the list. It's actually up the list and top priority. We have those processes in place and followed. And then just things then calm down. It's kind of like when you have all this chaos going on, it's like in the middle of the storm, and then you just like start calming one area and then the other one will become calmer and calmer and calmer. It's just like a domino effect.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Yeah.
It's good analogy.
Thank you. Yeah. So we started with strategy, but before that we talked about culture, the importance of having a good culture. And that can start at the beginning from the onset of the company, but also as you're growing, you might evolve this culture and make sure that you really understand the core values, because you have those core values are innate to who you are, right? So
that's right.
They need to be identified and sometimes have to be looked at, because maybe you are operating on some core values that are not necessarily going to help you with the growth. So that's where you have to look at it and really define that culture. Then strategy. Then we went into actually having processes and procedures and how to get them followed by all. I want to go back to that culture and add the aspect of vision. And the reason also I want to touch on it is, we got introduced through a visionary coach, Lois Weinbeld, Weinblatt, and she and we recorded a podcast, an amazing podcast where she actually walked me through her process on how to create a vision. And she is, the name of her company is True North Visionaries. And I know you work together with her, and creating that vision, having that vision in place is so important, right?
Oh, totally. I agree. And it helps really both rally the organization as well as let people see a path. It's not like, many times people cast out a vision. We want to get to Mars. And people think, well, that's impossible. It's not something we can achieve. It's nothing that we know how to do. And so what Lois and others that kind of focus in this area do is help kind of craft a kind of executable plan, even though there's a lot of unknown steps, and how we're going to get all the way there many times is completely not defined yet, but it helps create alignment across the organization of what's important, where are we going, and generally how are we going to get there? Because as companies continue to pivot and adjust to market conditions or other things, they ultimately need to refine that vision and or path along the way. So I was first exposed to a kind of a visioning process. I used to be a member of an organization called Vistage, which is
I'm part of Vistage. Yes, absolutely.
A great leadership development and management coaching program. And so there was one of the city summit annual events. They brought in an author, Cameron Herold, who wrote a book called Double Double.
I just interviewed Cameron. The podcast just came out, and Double Double Vivid Vision. We talked about that, and I just had to chime in because I love that. That's how I got introduced to Cameron through one of my clients that went through the Vivid Vision process. Perfect. And Cameron is amazing to talk to, by the way. So
yeah, he was a great guest speaker, keynote speaker, and so one of his tools is the painted picture, and that's something that I kind of grasped and something that we had done here at Centura when I first joined the organization several years ago. So we had this painted picture of where we wanted to get to as an intermediary step 5 years down the road. And what Lois did was able to take that document and really, I'll call it, bring it to life when we actually went through her process of gathering inputs and support from the top to the bottom of the organization all the way to the top. And then ultimately we produced a document that we can now share, whether that's with new recruits that we're talking to about coming into the organization so they can see where we're going and why it's important, to even clients and business partners that do business with us so they can understand who we are and what makes us tick. So it's an invaluable process. Obviously, most companies don't think about going through that kind of process. But we've been pretty excited now that it's in place to share that with just about everybody. So that is definitely an area of providing clarity around what it's going to look like, and that's the painted picture. Ultimately, it's giving someone who's walking into that organization several years hence to say, what does it look like? What does it feel like to be in that organization? And then it brings it to life. And that's where people, at all levels can get excited about working towards that vision and what their piece or element is of the organization and how they can help get there. So something that I believe is very another useful and critical tool to getting alignment in the organization as you continue to grow.
Absolutely. I agree. So we have the vision, we have the strategy, we have the processes and procedures, and and the hard work that it takes to actually make it happen and be consistent. And just like when we talked before, the episode asked you what's top of mind, and you said, well, we are setting our goals for 2022, right? And this is like the time of the year when you do that. And that is part of it, is like knowing where you want to go and setting specific goals and then figure out how to get there.
Yeah. And you asked about tools. And I think the other thing that's another tool that I've found to be very critical, or at least one that I believe in heavily, is the entrepreneurial operating system, or EOS. And so Gina Wickman is the founder of that system, and something that I was again introduced to as part of my Vistage tenure. But ultimately, there's always a challenge of trying to balance priorities, and high growth organizations often fail because they try to do too much.
That's right.
And so what EOS really helps encourage, and there's a lot of elements to it, and I can't do it justice today, but if anyone's interested, there's a website, you can look it up, and there's plenty of implementers that help companies embrace it. But
I actually have an interview with Eric Albertson, who is an awesome implementer here from Portland. And I did an interview also with Julie Marquis, where she walked me through how to do a great L10 meeting. So you can listen to that interview.
There you go. There's 2 links that you'll have to include in this podcast. That's
right. And I'm actually having another interview next week with another implementer. So I agree with you. That system is amazing and definitely helps organizations focus on what's important and not be all over the place, but have some very important basics in. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of rocks, or quarterly objectives, or OKRs in some other organizations, is so critical, because many times you can have people working really, really hard, but they're working in areas that aren't really focused on what's critical for that company's success in the next 3 or 6 months. Yep. And so what it does, it helps coalesce or bring together everyone in terms of a direct, alignment around hitting those most important things to get that company through the growth and achieve their objectives.
I agree, and I like the fact that it's doable. So instead of having like this amazing, like a list of 10 goals, just pick 3. Just pick 3, just a few for the quarter, and have that win of actually making it happen. And then you can then look at the next one and the next one and the next one, where everything aligns, obviously, like you said, with the vision and with the strategy. But you don't get yourself overwhelmed and you feel like a failure because you have all this list and you didn't accomplish anything, as opposed to having a list you can actually do and hold everybody accountable to doing. Then you start changing the culture into a culture of doingness, of doers, as opposed to just thinkers and strategists. There's no implementation, right? Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I think the hardest part when you're doing it is saying no. What are the things that we are not going to do because it isn't critical? And so being able to draw that line in the sand, saying, I know that's great, it's exciting, we want to get to that, whatever that initiative might be, but you just have to put that aside and say, right now, we have to focus on these 3 things. And if you repeat that cycle on a, whether it's a 90-day cadence or whatever makes sense for your organization, you can accomplish so much more, because the energy and people are aligned around just getting those things done, and it can happen more quickly, and ultimately leads to, I think, a greater chance of success.
Absolutely. In my interview with Cameron Herold, Cameron is all about the COO, the second in command, right? So he talked about the relationship of the second in command, the COO, with the visionary. And the visionary will have all these bright ideas, and that's what they need. They need to be creating all the time and think about the future and being out there. But then you have to have the COO who say, okay, well, let's just pick those, say no to some of them. That's a great idea. We can do it in the future. Right now, for this quarter, we're going to concentrate on those 3, right? On those 2 or 3 rocks.
Yeah. COO's subtitle is Dr. No. We have to say no, 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 while the visionary is always trying to say yes, yes, yes. So it's a balancing act in the organization, for sure.
That's true. I think the CFO also says no. That's the title of the CFO, really saying no, no, no. Maybe the COO sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, the COO will say yes. The CFO will say yes too. But it's that. I mean, actually, Cameron tells a story in that podcast about the role, like how important it is to have a strong CFO that can say no when it's really needed to say no, as opposed to when you don't do that, what can happen? I mean, he was telling the story about a company almost going bankrupt because of that, because if it's a yes, 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 right? So you have to have boundaries. Going back to processes and procedures, they just put the right boundaries in place, but also give the right roadmap so people know where to go and how to actually achieve the goals. They know the rules of the game. I mean, that's really what it is. It's a playbook with rules that you know how to play. It's much easier to play the game and achieve the victory that you want as opposed to going all over the place.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Good. So in closing, Jonathan, any other advice if we have COOs listen to this, or owners that they are experiencing accelerated growth and they listen to this and go, yeah, I need to implement it. Where do I start?
I would say just listen to all your podcasts. Sounds like you got it all baked right there, because all my best practices and tools you've already touched on at one point or another. So I commend you on that. And, there's a few things, obviously, that I mentioned, whether it's Vistage as an organization. If you haven't touched on that, great to try. You can even guest in a various Vistage group to see what it's all about. But, like I said, going back to getting those experts that have been there, that have done that, and bring them into the organization, that's a huge investment, but it also will ultimately pan out when it means that you can get to that objective of yours, whatever that might be, with that much higher probability or that much quicker, ultimately spending whatever it's going to be to find the right people to help you get there and avoid mistakes. It's going to be a very significant return on investment.
Absolutely. And also one thing that I really admire about you is that you have that quest for learning. You always want to learn new methods, new systems, like when you and I talked and, you had the processes mapped, but you wanted to know, how can I improve upon it, right? How can I get it? Is there another system out there? I know you said it's kind of like saying no, but what I experience is you don't say the no to learning, right? Because that can also get you into, you can advance that way. It doesn't mean that you're going to apply every new system that you learn, but we have to be inquisitive and learn and see what's out there, because maybe there is something that is better, but if you don't learn and you don't observe, you don't investigate, you will never know. So I think that's also very powerful in helping organizations grow and not be stagnant.
Yeah, I agree. Unless you're growing, you're dying. And if you're not trying to improve, your process, improve your product, make it better, either competition is going to come in, there'll be evolution in the marketplace, and you'll find someone else is going to be eating your lunch instead of you. And so having that mantra of, continuous improvement, raising the bar, all those things are ultimately elements that will make your organization successful over the long term, which is really what we're trying to do at our company is create a sustainable organization that can last generations. So it does take a very strong culture and a very long-term mindset to make that happen.
Absolutely. So Jonathan, if our listeners want to be in touch with you, want to find out more, want to talk to you, what's the best way to reach you?
Probably on email, but also via our website, centurawealth.com. That's CENTURA, wealth.com. But via email, it's jfreeman, FREEMAN, at centurawealth.com. Either of those, or just reaching out on LinkedIn, which I'm pretty engaged and active in, would be an easy way to get a hold of me. Excellent.
Well, thank you so much. This was a wealth of information, and I'm sure I'm going to quote this podcast in a future podcast. So yes. I already interviewed Jonathan on it, and we have a solution for that. So,
well, great. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it today, and certainly would commend anyone who's looking to use you and your tools in their organization, because it really shows thought leadership around making sure you're growing for scaling growth. So it was a pleasure, and I'm excited to hear more and continue to listen to your future guests.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.